Hello and good morning. My name is Roy Torbert. I'm joined here by Amory Lovins, the founder and the chief scientist of RMI Institute, as well as our longtime friend and supporter, Jeff Tannenbaum. We've just completed a breakfast briefing here in our New York office to a wide variety of our supporters. Had a great discussion, likely to continue it here with some deeper dives on a few of those topics. I'll let Amory and Jeff briefly introduce themselves.
I co-founded Rocky Mountain Institute in 1982 to help create a clean, prosperous, secure, low-carbon energy future. We now have 220 folks around the world, actually the majority of them abroad, pursuing that work and working largely with the private sector because we want to get stuff done. So we come up with ideas that we think might work, prove them in pilots, and figure out who's interested in to scale them up, and then partner with those organizations, often in a competitive fashion, to spread them all over the place for fun and profit. We are a nonprofit, independent public charity, nonpartisan, apolitical. We do practice, not theory, solutions, not problems, and transformation, not incrementalism.
Hi, I'm Jeff Tannenbaum, and my background is in private equity, hedge funds, business building, and industry building. And my current focus is finding big problems that need solutions that can be scaled. And I'm excited to say that over the past decade, I've been able to work on a number of scaling solutions with Amory and his team at Rocky Mountain Institute.
One of our first ventures together was when Jeff called up and said he had this interesting idea for financing saving energy and water in buildings, and buildings use about 3/4 of the nation's electricity and emit about emit about 2/5 of the greenhouse gases. So getting financing that would take the capital burden off the owner, fix up the building, sounded like a really good idea. And now this is what, a $10 billion or so effort?
Yeah, that's right. And
called PACE bonds.
PACE bonds. And I think it'd be good to tell a little story about this because it's instructive of how Rocky Mountain is making tremendous progress as not just a think and do tank, but a scaling tank. I reached out to Amory on this probably about a dozen years ago, and I had met him at his house, and we had brainstormed on a few ideas. And when I ran across this new form of retrofitting homes and buildings, I thought it could be really large. I was willing to dedicate a good bit of my life to figuring it out and potentially scaling it, but I didn't know. And I invited Amory to brainstorm with me and really to kick the tires to see if he thought this could be one type of secret sauce. And we went out to the Milken Institute. We brainstormed there. I was encouraged. I then started PACE Nation, which was the NGO around it. And now we've retrofitted about 300,000 homes and buildings in America. New York City just announced the launch of PACE for their 37,000 commercial buildings. And I could say that without not just inspiration from Amory and his team, but also critiquing, it would never be where it is today.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think you're a great example of how the right sort of thoughts at the start of a process, but then taken quickly to the market to prove out their validity, can really lead to profitable and transformational change, some of which also happen in the solar industry.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Right. I've dealt with a lot of NGOs in my life, and what I found unique about Amory's approach in the Rocky Mountain Institute was the focus on market-based solutions. I'm a capitalist, I'm an entrepreneur, I like to try to build industries. And when the solar industry was suffering about 10 years ago, I thought it was time for a market-based solution to show that solar is profitable, solar can work. And I stumbled across a new idea at that time called utility scale solar. And I took a handful of really plays out of Amory and Rocky Mountain Institute's playbook. Play number one was design thinking. You know, we whiteboarded how we would build solar farms at scale. We didn't base it on how it was done, we based on how things should be done. And we came up with a method where we could replicate giant building of solar farms across the country very quickly by systematizing processes. And over 3 years, we ended up building what became the largest private solar utility in the U.S. We sold it for several $billions, and probably more instructive is we showed that it could be profitable. We were earning about $150 million of cash flow. We'd employed 3,000 people in red and blue states. The final point I make on this one is I got a call from Marty Pickett at Rocky Mountain Institute, and she said, Jeff, would you or someone from the team from S-Power like to meet Microsoft and others who are interested in buying solar power? And this could be another growth engine to get big corporate contracts. We sent some executives out to Redmond, and I'm happy to say that last month in Virginia, S-Power announced they're going to be breaking ground on the largest solar farm in the eastern United States, 500 megawatts, over 6,000 acres, and we'll be supplying the power for Microsoft and Apple's data centers. We've got them together for the first time, and I want to thank you, Amory, because without you starting this buying consortium called REBA now, it would never have happened. So it's another great example of working with RMI and solving problems and scaling.
You know, Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance now has over 200 large companies that bought over 8.5 billion watts of renewable power just last year alone, 2018, and they were responsible for something like 98% of such transactions in the U.S. power market. And of course, solar now is scaling incredibly all over the world, faster than cell phones. It now adds more capacity each year than all fossil fuel generation put together, a lot of it on exactly the model that you pioneered with S-Power. So we feel good about that. And solar capacity in the world is now 50 times the International Energy Agency's forecast from 2002.
Jeff, I must also admit, I've seen you somewhat in action. I lead a lot of RMI's work with Caribbean islands, particularly in Puerto Rico. And a similar theme, you had both the personal interest and connection into Puerto Rico, but also I think some guidance from Amory as you helped kick off what has now turned into some truly transformational change on that island. Will you say a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a really unique aspect of the DNA of the Rocky Mountain Institute is the nonpartisan nature of coming up with solutions and getting stakeholders you never thought could solve problems working together, whether it be the Department of Defense, Republicans, Democrats, big corporations, the list goes on and on. When the hurricane unfortunately struck Puerto Rico, it became clear to lots of people, including me, that their entire energy infrastructure was wrong. It should have been distributed, renewable, and resilient. And this was a wonderful opportunity to remake the infrastructure. My reflex reaction was, I'm going to call Amory and we're going to figure out how to work on this. I sent him an email. We had just sold S-Power, and so I had a little bit of time. And he thought it was a good idea. He put his team on it, and Roy actually helped lead this initiative. And over 2 years, they did yeoman's work, unbelievable work, bringing together stakeholders that typically don't sit in rooms together. Got them to work together to the point of last month, I believe, the governor of Puerto Rico signed a bill sponsored by parties for 100% clean energy and the shutting of all coal plants and dramatically increased energy efficiency requirements. So it's another unique example of what I'll call, it's like Mighty Mouse RMI, the world's smallest yet most powerful NGO if you really want to get things done.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Amory, I think some of those themes really connect to how RMI, from our history in the United States since 1982, has now really turned more global and found great traction with some of these approaches in places like China and India and elsewhere. Will you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, the majority of our work is now overseas. I've worked in 70 odd countries. A number of us have broad global experience, but we really were so so lucky in being in the right place at the right time to help the government of China figure out its own reinventing fire strategy, how to use energy 7 times more productively, get 2/3 off fossil fuel, burn 80% less coal, and end up getting 13 times more work out of each unit of fossil carbon, $3 trillion cheaper than business as usual. And that slid right into the 13th 5-year plan, whose energy authors were our customers. Then we helped the government of India with personal mobility, making it shared, connected, and electric. We've been doing the islands work, African electrification, and now we're exploring how we can help in Southeast Asia. You're leading that work.
Yeah.
It's exciting times.
It really does speak to sort of the need for scale and the need for different sorts of partnerships that often transcend borders and transcend the specific lines even between sectors. Jeff, I know.
And they all learn from each other.
Exactly. And some of that sort of interdisciplinary thinking, I think, has definitely been a theme of your collaboration, but also underpins something I believe you've just announced in the last few days.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the Higg Index briefly, but what I'd say is it owes a bow to Amory and RMI's work, because one thing I've seen Amory do time and time again is to find a great idea that can be scaled, and then finding that initial partner that can help make it a reality, like a Walmart or the Department of Defense. So I stumbled across an idea about 6 months ago, focused on dramatically changing the global apparel supply chain, which is responsible for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. And effectively, it's something called the Higg Index, which rates the 60,000 factors that make all our clothing, our sporting goods, our shoes, our toys, and drives them towards much greater sustainability in terms of the energy they use, the water they use, the chemicals they use, and the materials that are made in the apparel. So it's going to be spun out of a NGO, Titan Grove's leading it. It's supported by 250 of the largest brands and retailers: Walmart, Nike, Levi's, Target, and so on. And I think it's going to really do some great things for reducing our footprint. And I think we're going to have an opportunity to work with Roy and others in Southeast Asia to accelerate its work.
Thanks, Jeff. And perhaps for our whole audience on Facebook Live, one last thought from each of you. What really excites you or drives some of your passions at the moment?
I'm excited about how to design buildings, factories, vehicles as whole systems for many benefits at once, not as piles of parts for single benefits. And that so-called integrated design can often make energy savings several-fold larger and cheaper than had been thought, and give them what's called increasing returns. That is, the more efficiency you buy, the cheaper it gets, so you buy more, so it gets cheaper, just like the virtuous spiral that makes renewables deploy so fast. We have a lot of evidence this stuff works from our having helped design over 1,000 buildings, $40-odd billion worth of factories, various vehicles, and now we see the uptake in the market starting to be really encouraging. We're figuring out how to make it all spread faster so that this unusual kind of design that is now rare, confined to a rather small number of practitioners, becomes commonplace, just as common as grass, and people wonder, why did we ever do it the other way?
I'm excited about two things. I'll go beyond one. The first is there's a much greater interest in market transformative ideas. And capital is being deployed, things are getting done. You're not seeing them in the headlines frequently, but there's a tremendous amount of positive things happening right now in what I'll call the overall clean economy, and that's very exciting. In addition to the amount of talent that's being attracted to this area in terms of executives who can lead companies that are transformative. The second thing I'm excited about is that there's been recently a lot of aspirational announcements about clean economy, both in the US and beyond, on the Democratic side in terms of candidates, as well as on the Republican side. And I think that that opens a potentially massive opportunity, much larger than what we've seen historically. And I think that, frankly, an organization like RMI is incredibly well positioned to help design or redesign the blueprints for an acceleration of a movement towards the clean economy.
Yeah, of course, as we recently pointed out in an op-ed in the New York Times, there are many, many kinds of benefits from efficiency, renewables, clean energy system for all, and you don't have to like every one of those benefits. You don't have to agree which benefit is most important in order to agree on what we ought to do together for whatever diverse reasons we have. Let's focus on outcomes, not motives, and that can turn gridlock and conflict, I think, into a unifying solution to our common energy challenge.
Great. Thank you, Amory. Thank you, Jeff. It's been really a pleasure to speak with you this entire morning. I'm also pleased to announce that RMI and one of our long-term supporters is offering a match grant from our supporter Richard Landers for $100,000. It will be matched 100% for gifts of $5,000 or more and 50% below $5,000. We're really pleased to announce this grant, and with all the great work and exciting challenges ahead, we're more than ever thankful for your support. Thank you all.